For the sake of time, I'm going to start. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's workshop, Pets Included Working Together Towards Animal Inclusive Housing Policy. We're excited to have you join us for this important conversation. I'm Michelle Villagomez, Senior Director for Municipal Affairs at the ASPCA, where I work to improve animal welfare policies with a focus on efforts to keep people and pets together. I'm very excited to introduce Kerri Thomson, Manager of Justice and Legislative Affairs at Humane Canada, who has been at the forefront of efforts to address one of the most pressing issues in housing today, the barriers that no pet policies create for both people and animals. Kerri is a licensed member of the Society of Ontario and is currently completing her degree in criminal, pardon me. Sorry, my notes got a little garbled there. Kerri is here to share insights from Humane Canada's Pet Inclusive Housing Initiative, a campaign launched last summer to raise awareness about the challenges faced by vulnerable individuals and families who are unable to find housing that allows pets. Those policies don't just affect tenants, as we know, working in this field. They have a profound impact on our animal shelters, which are overwhelmed with healthy adoptable animals surrendered by tenants who can't secure pet-friendly accommodations. As part of this initiative, Humane Canada worked closely with government officials, advocacy groups, and individuals to amplify the voices of people with pets through a national petition, and also conducted valuable research on Ontario's unique No Pets Void provision in its tenancy legislation. Today, Kerri will walk us through the findings of a critical survey that highlights the real-world impact of those policies and discuss how we can collectively work towards meaningful change. This is an issue that connects with human health, animal welfare, and environmental sustainability, what we commonly call the One Health, One Welfare approach. And it's only through collaboration that we can create solutions that benefit us all. Please join me in welcoming Kerri Thomson. I will just say, in terms of timekeeping, the last 10 minutes of this session will be open for Q&A. On the HOVA app, please put your questions in the Q&A section, not the chat section. I will be monitoring the Q&A. Kerri, I will flag for you when there's 5 minutes left, just so that you know. And we're really excited to find out about the work that you're doing, our neighbors to our north, and I will cede the floor to you.
Great. Thank you very much for that kind introduction. I'm just going to share my screen and can you all see the slide there? Okay, I see someone nodding. Perfect. All right, so welcome. We are here to talk about how we can work together toward animal inclusive housing policy. So, Humane Canada is the Canadian Federation of Humane Societies and SPCAs. We represent more than 50 members across Canada in all 10 provinces and 2 territories. Our vision is quite simple. We are looking to build a humane country. And as Canada's voice for animal welfare, we work together with our members and associates to end animal cruelty, protect animals, and promote their humane treatment. So a little bit about this project. The summer of 2024, we launched a campaign on pet inclusive housing after we had been hearing stories from our members about how they had become overwhelmed with surrenders, and what they were hearing from people was that they couldn't find housing with their animals. So that campaign included a national parliamentary petition, and that was sponsored by MP Nathaniel Erskine Smith, who was then promoted to Housing, Infrastructure and Communities Minister just prior to the government break and the dissolution of the government. And we also included a survey asking renters with pets in Ontario about their experiences. So Ontario is the only jurisdiction that has a no pets void sort of provision in their tenancy legislation. So what that means is Any clause in a standard tenancy agreement that prohibits animals cannot be enforced. So, however, we had still been hearing reports of Ontario tenants who were having difficulty finding housing with pets. They kept getting denied. So, for context, Ontario is the largest province in Canada in terms of population. We represent about 40% of the country's population. And so we wanted to know more about what was happening, why this provision in our tenancy legislation that seems pretty simple was apparently not working. So we also met over the summer a few times with representatives from Housing, Infrastructure and Communities Canada to highlight the lack of pet-inclusive housing during their draft consultations for what would become the national blueprint for a renter's Bill of Rights. So we wanted to make sure that they knew that that was a contributing factor to the current housing crisis and also to overcrowding in humane societies, SPAs, SPCAs, and other animal shelters. So why this project? 60% of Canadian households have cats and dogs, and 70% of those identify them as members of the family. In a 2023 USA Today survey, 67% of people between 18 to 26 said that they were choosing pets over parenthood, and 43% for ages 27 to 42. The way Canadians see their animals has changed dramatically over the past several decades. When non-traditional pets are included in that number of 60% of Canadian households having pets, that figure jumps to 77%. So as a result, no pet clauses are disproportionately impacting everyone, but especially young people in their life, trying to start out, find their own place, maybe bring their cat along, their dog, and it's becoming a struggle that's unnecessary. So past Humane Canada shelter surveys have indicated consistently that housing issues such as moving, landlord concerns, and challenges finding pet-friendly accommodation are the main reasons for surrenders of cats and dogs. So we believe that no one should be forced to make that choice between their animal and a place to live. But as the cost of rent increases and availability becomes less and less, that's exactly what seems to be happening across Canada. So I feel like I'm preaching somewhat to the choir here and echoing what a lot of other speakers today have highlighted. But barriers for women and children fleeing violence, this is a significant barrier for them. In addition to young people trying to move out on their own, seniors and people with disabilities, this is another vulnerable group that experience additional barriers to finding affordable housing, especially when pets are involved. And they're attempting to flee abuse in their own homes. So Canadian studies have indicated that 56% of Canadian women have delayed leaving abusive homes because they were not able to secure housing with their pets. 60% of those women who were left with no choice but to leave their animals behind. A third of them reported that they were considering returning to their abuser out of fear for their animal. These women often have limited financial resources, but leaving their pets behind with their abuser is also not an option. So many are left with an impossible choice to make, especially in this current rental climate. So according to our Statistics Canada compilation, only 28% of facilities for victims of abuse offer accommodations for pets in 2022 to 2023, although they admitted it has been identified as crucial for those escaping violence. And 85% of those facilities indicated that the lack of affordable long-term housing was one of the main challenges facing the residents. So the research, the results from the Ontario survey of renters with pets. So from July to October of 2024, we invited public responses to a brief survey. So there were 6 questions with yes or no answers, and in 5 of those, we collected qualitative data with additional space so that respondents could expand on their answers. We received 331 anonymous responses. The survey was distributed by a link through our website, as well as shared on social media by Humane Canada, as well as our members and associates. The demographics that we collected include age, postal code, gender identity was optional. So we just kept it simple and to the point. We just wanted to know what they were experiencing. So in terms of demographics, 39% of respondents were between 25 and 34 years old, which aligns with both what we'd been hearing anecdotally as well as other research that indicates that younger tenants with pets feel that they have little strength in negotiations with landlords, especially in the current housing landscape where a landlord is able to dictate lease terms regarding pets and can easily find another tenant if a prospective or current tenant is unhappy with the no pet clause. So that is supported by a qualitative 2018 study out of Calgary by Dr. Taryn Graham, where younger adults reported that they'd felt discriminated against because of their pets and somewhat powerless in their rental negotiations. So another factor in this survey were 84% of respondents identified as women and 9% identified as men. Let me go back. Sorry about that. So in terms of postal code, most of the respondents came from either southwestern Ontario, which is that bottom part, sort of south of the Toronto region and west of it. And 34% were from central Ontario, so around Hamilton, Niagara, Barrie, Burlington, that sort of area. So the lower part. And as well as 20% of respondents came from metropolitan Toronto. So that includes Mississauga, Woodbridge, sort of cities immediately around the Toronto region. So less respondents came from Northern Ontario, and 1% came from BC because they formerly lived in Ontario. So this data aligns with the most populated parts of the province, so there were really no surprises there. For future research considerations, we could also match the qualitative data with the postal codes to determine whether there are specific issues in certain regions or more issues or one issue as opposed to others. And our first question was about awareness of the law. So 27% of respondents were not aware of this section in the Residential Tenancies Act, or the RTA, which makes no pet provisions in a standard lease agreement void and unenforceable. So standard lease agreement in this context refers to purpose-built rentals like apartments and houses, or apartments in houses that are covered by the RTA. Condos are also covered by that, but they also have separate provincial legislation that gives authority to their specific condo building board, to create rules for their buildings. So they have to kind of align under both of those legislation, and the board legislation usually supersedes the Residential Tenancies Act. So areas that are not covered by the RTA include any shared accommodation where kitchens or bathrooms are communal, as well as other co-op situations, so cooperative housing, and a lot of social housing and senior citizen housing. So the shared accommodations could affect students because it's often found in formal and in informal student housing. So the 27% not being aware of the law means that unfortunately they could potentially be taken advantage of by property owners or managers who just simply don't want animals in their holdings for whatever reason. And when we asked if people had felt like they'd been denied rental accommodations in the past because of their pets, 74% said yes or maybe, but unable to prove it. So we took the qualitative responses and broke them down into six main categories. And most common response was some variation of no pets allowed was stated up front in the ad, or when meeting with the property owner and mentioning they had a pet. So the other category responses ranged from landlords being angry or holding a grudge when finding out about the pets after the fact, so after the tenant had moved in, or tenants having to lie on their application about their animals because they know that the no pets clause is not enforceable, but they also can't report having an animal because they risk being denied. So, and other ones were simply not bothering to apply for any of these rentals because they did not want to have to lie about their animal. So, here's a compilation of some of the most common responses that we received to the denied because of a pet. So other responses included, since rentals are so competitive, people will bid on apartments or offer several months in advance to secure them, which is illegal under the RTA. And a pet is always viewed as a strike against you. And also many landlords will just refuse to rent to you unless an additional deposit is paid to cover pet damage, which is frustrating because children also cause damage. So it is illegal to ask for pet deposits or any additional deposits in Ontario, with the exception of first and last month's rent, and that is under Section 134, Sub 1A, additional charges prohibited. And of those that were evicted or felt intimidated to leave because of their pet, 25% of respondents answered yes or maybe. So most of those had felt harassed, threatened, or intimidated. Others claimed family members would be moving in, which is a common sort of way to move people out and then jack up the rent. It's called rent evictions. That is used in Ontario to remove people who've been living in a unit for a long time and then jack up the rent after they're gone. Others blamed pet for damage to unit or property, and others were fine with certain animals, but not with others. So they were okay with cats or small dogs, but not okay with large dogs. And among the other, the category included responses like, we chose to live with my parents. We can't even get a place to live, let alone be evicted. And when a future landlord asked if you don't have any pets, right? And they replied, yes, I have a cat. And I told the rental agent about it. The landlord then tried to say that they couldn't live there because because the upstairs tenants who lived in a completely separate unit had a bird. So these are more of some of those responses that were intimidated to leave because of a pet. So it would be interesting in future to see, given that 84% of participants identified as women, if there's any correlation between the harassment and intimidation with those who responded who were women. So regarding service animals, in Ontario, it is illegal to deny anyone any sort of living accommodation under the Ontario Human Rights Code. They're automatically is exempt from any prohibitive pet legislation because it's a human rights violation. But that doesn't appear to try to stop any prospective property owners from trying. So arbitrary rules such as no more than one pet or property owners using other legitimate means to evict tenants with pets, such as if the animal's behavior is severely affecting the other tenant's quality of life, or allergies without legitimacy are also problematic in this area. So in the past 5 years, we asked if anyone had had to rehome or surrender their pet in order to obtain rental accommodations. So fortunately, well, not fortunately. Fortunately, the majority of them did not, but still 9% had said that yes, they did. So, and the overwhelming majority of them said that there was no affordable rentals available that accepted pets, um, and that they were not yet surrendered their pet, but feared that they would have to due to the lack of availability of affordable options. And then other responses included they lied on the application again when asked about having pets because they knew about the no pets void provision, that they had moved into a house and this no longer applied to them, but they were told in their last apartment that if they didn't get rid of their dog, they were going to get evicted. So again, these are some of the qualitative responses that we had received to that particular question. Of the ones that said that they would never rehome a pet, that they would move or find somewhere else to live. So what happens if there is nowhere else to live or move to? What if you're out of options? And like so many are in this economic climate. There was a parent who had to surrender her two kittens, or another survey participant who said that they were desperate for an affordable apartment closer to their job. The landlord's policy was no dogs, so I had to surrender my 12-year-old dog. I still feel sick about it. So they might have originally said the same thing, that they would never surrender their pet, but unfortunately, life circumstances get in the way. And of those who felt that they had been barred for applying for rental housing because of their pets, 82% answered yes. So 79% of those had applied to a rental apartment or house, so they would be automatically covered under the standard lease agreement. The condominium unit was 9% of responses, and the other refers to places like campus residence, shared accommodation where someone was just renting a room, as well as emergency shelter, was included in another response. So this all reminds us that in the current rental climate, where it is almost impossible to find affordable housing anywhere, although allegedly it's supposed to be getting better in Ontario, rents are coming down. People are increasingly turning to alternatives like shared accommodation, where they have fewer protections because the Residential Tenancies Act does not apply in those situations. So, tenancy legislation varies widely across the country. So, when we asked whether there should be standardized rules for renters and landlords across Canada that would allow for pets within reasonable limits, there was an overwhelming response that said yes. So, 94% of our respondents said yes. So, of the three that disagreed with standardization across the country, some had said this is a provincial, not a federal issue, which is true. Every province has the jurisdiction to decide on their own tenancy legislation, and that landlords have the authority to create contracts to accommodate the use of their rental property, and any laws or policy that are created can be used or abused by landlords and other tenants. But again, overwhelmingly, the responses just kept repeating pets are family. Pets are family. They're not just property, they're family. So that was one sort of theme that really emerged out of this survey. So the major findings were that more than 25% of survey respondents were not aware of the no pets void provision in Ontario. And that despite that provision, which appears to protect animals or protect pet owning tenants and their animals, there's nothing preventing property owners or managers from screening out prospective tenants because of their pets. That it's becoming increasingly difficult to find rental housing that accept pets in the first place, which leaves many tenants to turn to alternatives which may not have the protections against eviction and unfair rental increases that are afforded by the Residential Tenancies Act, and that 94% of respondents agreed that standardized rules across Canada would make things clearer for everyone involved, so property owners, tenants, and their pets, And the bottom line was pets are family, period. So, some of the future consideration and current limitations of this particular survey. Male versus female identifying. So, I mentioned earlier that perceived treatment and differences in that by property owners could be a consideration in the future. That a regional trend breakdown to see where some issues may be occurring and some issues may not be occurring in certain parts of the province. And in the right hands, this study could help to address gaps in the current legislation and also form a model for other governments to adopt a more balanced approach to pet inclusive housing. So, one limitation in particular in this study that came out was sample bias. So, the survey was mostly distributed by animal welfare organizations like Humane Canada and our members. So there could be an automatic bias there towards pet inclusive spaces. So we wonder what it would be, what the responses would be, and how it would work out in the general population. And another limitation was that the survey was only available online. So anyone in a rural or remote area that doesn't have access to a stable internet connection would unfortunately not be able to respond. So we're missing those perspectives as well. And then another issue came up that was not considered in this survey, but was brought to my attention. So one respondent had an experience with trying to bundle their renter's insurance with existing car insurance and was online trying to get a quote. So the insurance, part of one of the questions was that are there any dogs on the property to be insured? And at first they were like, oh, great, this is so inclusive. But then they quickly realized that no, no, it's not inclusive at all. And one thing that this respondent said was being a renter in Ontario with an animal is bad enough, but add the intersection of breed-specific legislation in, and you've got something truly terrible, which sounds to me like it should belong on a t-shirt. So the person who responded said that they had a pit bull type dog. So this quote cannot be completed was what came up when she clicked on the pity. And they were informed that when they called to make a complaint about their insurance company and said that they would be switching to another provider, they were told that animals don't necessarily mean that you won't be provided with insurance, but that you would have to have a conversation with the insurance company regarding the specific animal and their behavior history. So, and because this person had been insured with them for so long that they could likely make an exception. But even if there were an exception to be made on a case-by-case basis, it's still not an equitable answer. And again, another quote came out that was gold was they're not asking about golden retriever guardians if their animal has ever bitten anyone before allowing them to get insurance. And none of this would be possible without the foundational work of some of our member organizations. So they've created resources for their communities and lobbied their own provincial governments to obtain systemic change. This list is not exhaustive. It doesn't include the many members that we have that offer emergency pet boarding or sheltering services, as well as safe pet programs and other services to keep people and their pets together. So people like Toronto Humane Society, PEI Humane Society, Winnipeg Humane Society, etc. So the BC SPCA they're one of our largest members, and they've been championing this issue for years in their province because of the lack of pet-friendly housing and the affordability issue out in BC. So since 2014, they had more than 12,400 cats, dogs, and other animals surrendered to them, specifically because of this issue. So they responded by creating a sample pet resume and a renter's guide with sample rent agreements for property owners and managers. And most recently, they've managed to elevate the need for pet-friendly housing into a provincial election issue and obtained a commitment from the BC NDP, so that's the New Democrat Party, who recently formed government at the end of 2024, to commit to ending the bias against pet owners and ending the no pets clauses in purpose-built rental buildings. Another one of our members, Montreal SPCA, in 2022, they'd submitted a petition to their National Assembly that had collected more than 33,000 signatures. And they're working to change provincial legislation with a bill called Bill 494, which was tabled in 2023, that would render no pet clauses ineffective in housing leases and they will continue to press their government on moving forward with that bill. In Saskatchewan, they've created a pet-friendly housing working group with University of Saskatchewan's Dr. Colleen Dell. She's also part of the Positive Connections Lab and Pause in Place initiative. So they are looking to raise awareness and improve access to rental housing. They've created a series of educational modules that highlight the need for and the benefits for allowing tenants with pets. And in their working group, they also include a member of the local rental manager and property owners association. So that's an important piece because you need to have everyone involved at the table for the conversation.
Carrie?
And just a plug, we have partnered with Positive Connections and University of Saskatchewan on a series of let's make more pet-friendly housing in rentals available, and that will be launched in April.
Larry, I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm gonna just chime in. We have about a minute left. But just to remind people, they can go into the Q&A section and submit any questions. As of right now, there are no questions in there, so you could keep going, but
Okay.
please type your questions in.
Okay, I'm almost done. So one last plug, Edmonton Humane Society has launched a help tool that connects people with resources to navigate issues. And they also have a list of pet-friendly rental agencies and buildings in their neighborhood, including a dedicated list for seniors. So we need to celebrate the wins where we can get them. In the blueprint for the Renters' Bill of Rights, under the principle of addressing inequity and discrimination, it now acknowledges that some groups are discriminated against in the rental market based on factors such as race, ethnicity, gender, age, sexual orientation, disability, or family status, and encourages that everyone who's a stakeholder in this industry, as well as calling on provincial and territorial governments to engage in conversation that includes research and addresses discriminatory practices like pet ownership by leveraging data and engaging in outreach to understand the experiences of these groups. And our national petition had received more than 19,000 signatures last year. So what you can do is remember that there's strength in numbers. So once you decide to act, look at your options and determine the best path to take for your organization. Gather support. So that means tell everyone what you're doing, as well as try to join forces with other like-minded organizations, and spread the word. So social media, community groups, local and regional news outlets, radio. You could decide in terms of your action. It could be a city council motion, provincial petition, or legislative motion, or a bill. So what we did was we asked our members and associates to share our campaign, and we took the information and resources that they had already created and put them together and presented them to our federal government. So where can we go from here? Educate to dispel myths and misconceptions for property owners and tenants alike. as well as continue to advocate to normalize pet inclusive spaces. So that includes not just rental housing, but emergency shelters, transitional housing, rehab facilities. So the human animal bond is critical for many people in crisis and leaving violent or otherwise unsafe situations, as well as those who are healing. So focusing on the positive power that animals have and that housing is a human right for everyone will be the key to moving that needle forward towards more inclusive spaces. But there has to be some compromise and some give and take between property owners and managers who may not understand the importance. So that's our job. That's what we need to do. And that is everything. So my information is there. My email address is kerri@humanecanada.ca, and I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you so much, Kerri. I will open the floor for questions in the Q&A. Take a minute and please submit any inquiry you might have.
I don't think there's any question.
I will just say the presentation and the survey was very, very informative. It is very interesting to see sort of the connection of what's going on with your gendered responses because, as we know, there is always like a link um, where landlords might feel more comfortable harassing a female tenant or discriminating against someone, as you said, with a disability. Um, it is a challenge that I think we're facing wherever we are in whatever municipality that we're in. We've experienced personally here in New York the challenges of rising rent. And people do not have, as you noted, the luxury of saying, well, I will just move and find something pet friendly, because it's very, very cost prohibitive.
Mhm.
If anybody, I'm seeing things in the chat, just give me a moment.
Yep.
Oh, everyone is very, very happy with the presentation. Again, I will open up the floor for questions if anyone has any questions for the Q&A. We've got the session until 4:15.
I will say that I'm in the process of finalizing my report on the survey findings, and it will be published, I'm hoping, by the end of April. So, not published in any sort of peer-reviewed journal or anything like that. I just mean published on the Humane Canada website. So, once that is ready to go, that has a more fulsome view of the findings, and there's a discussion and more recommendations based on the recommendations there that I gave earlier.
I will open the floor once more for questions, but I think everyone found the session very, very informative. We have one thing. Let's see what's going on there. We've got a question from Rachel. Any advice on how to help educate leaders at city and state level in terms of how supportive housing for people and pets makes financial sense?
That is a great question. There is data out there. So we used data from and now I'm blanking on their name, but they're out of Colorado, Michelin, Human Animal Bond Institute. Um, but there is data there that does indicate that the amount of pet damage that is done in units usually only amounts to less than $200, and that financially it makes sense for people who are looking to have longevity in tenants, that tenants with pets are more likely to stay, like up to at least 30 to almost, in some cases, 75% longer than tenants without pets. So they find because pet-friendly housing is so scarce that once they find a place that accept their animals, they're willing to stay there.
Great. And we have one last question and then we will wrap up from Steve. Are you finding more pet-friendly housing available in luxury buildings?
No. That seems to be where, and that's where the problem is. A lot of the purpose-built rentals or the condos especially are becoming more of a luxury building so that there's a price tag that goes with that, as well as restrictions on pets. So it seems to be that the more expensive a unit is, the least likely they are to accept animals. So I just found the link to, and it's Michelson Found Animals, Humane Animal Bond Research Institute. So that's a
Great.
study out of 2019. And I'm going to see if it'll let me copy it and paste it somewhere.
Great. On that note, I want to thank everyone for coming. Thank you so much, Kerri. We will definitely check out more information on your work, on Humane Canada, and check out what Michelson is doing in this space as well. Thank you very much for sharing your information. I'm sure that people will reach out to you. And I want to wish everyone a very happy conference. These are wonderful sessions, and we will see you around. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.